Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order of Jackson County Board of Commissioners. Today's our work session, January the 11th, 2022, and I'll recognize our county manager, Mr. Don Adams, who walked us through each one of these items today where we have informal discussions and from a work session approach.
Yes, sir. First item, we have Mr. Troy Roski here, appearing before the board to provide. He is our Nantahala National Forest District Ranger, and he is here to provide information to the public and to the board in regards to the forest plan revisions. Mr. Roski.
Good afternoon. My name is Troy Waske, and it's good to be with you all today. I'm the relatively new district ranger on the Nantahala National Forest out of Franklin, and of course we cover Macon County and Jackson County as well as Swain County, all included on the 260,000 acre ranger district of the Nantahala National Forest. So it's good to be with you all. I'd say it's a little overdue. It's been on my list to come up here and visit with you all at some point, so it's great to be with you today. Had a couple topics of interest, one being the forest plan, and you should have a handout regarding that, and that's largely for your kind of offline reading. I'm not going to go through that word for word today. I might highlight a couple sections of that attachment. And then I also wanted to just touch briefly on the Secure Rural Schools program and give you all an update on that, where that stands, and maybe some next steps forward with that. So with that, I'm also happy to take general questions, of course. So if you have any kind of other topics of interest affecting the National Forest, happy to take that, and just always want to make myself available. And Don Adams, of course, has my contact info. I can leave some business cards. So whatever you all need, we want to be here to help you and be responsive to you. So let's jump in on the forest plan topic first. And I know some of you all have been engaged in this in the past. This has been going on, my goodness, for probably the better part of 10 years now, the revision process. And so just a basic intro to this. The forest planning process is something that's been in place since 1976. And there was an act called the National Forest Management Act, which required every national forest in the nation to go through comprehensive planning on a 10 or 20 year cycle. Now, that hasn't happened. Most forests are on probably a 30-year cycle, because it takes about 10 years to go through the process, unfortunately, and that varies across the nation. But our current plan, for example, is from 1987, and that was amended heavily in 1994. And so, we're 25, 30 years old, maybe more. It's quick math, but anyway, so we're getting pretty long in the tooth with our current plan. And so they embarked on a revision process several years ago, and that process, I'm happy to report, is coming to a conclusion. And so here in the next few weeks, we expect to have that final plan released to the public, and that will start a series of kind of closeout objection process that I'll go through in a little more detail. So you can expect to see that here hopefully later this month, if everything goes according to plan. So a couple things I want to cover. Big picture, the plan is meant to kind of have a broad overview of the entire Nantahala and Pisgah National Forest landscape. And in North Carolina, the National Forest, you actually have 4 of them: Nantahala, Pisgah, and then the URA and the Croatan. The URA and the Croatan are managed from Asheville out of the same headquarters under which my district is managed. But those are going through a separate planning process. And right now the purview is just the Nantahala and the Pisgah. Now, just because we have a plan doesn't mean that subsequent projects, just breeze right through the system. Those all still have to go through project level National Environmental Policy Act planning and other engagement with cultural resources, state agencies, and so on. So that kind of tactical scale stuff still continues on. The new plan kind of takes a novel approach. This is a little different from most of our traditional plans in that it has an ecosystem focus. And so I don't know if that was covered in previous conversations where we've come and reported to you all, but this kind of looks more like watershed scale ecotypes across the landscape, and it's a more thorough, kind of thoughtful approach to land management. So that's one of the key changes I wanted to point out to you. Another aspect of this plan is that it's collaborative. And, the world's changed a lot since 1987. It's changed a lot since 1994. We are much more interconnected. We're much more reliant on partners. We're much more technologically, transparent with how we do business. And so for those reasons, in addition to others, there's a huge call for collaborative planning and management and engagement. And so this plan specifically calls out to that. Another aspect of this plan includes monitoring and development. That's a huge part of any plan, and this plan, of course, is no exception to that. So what we can expect to see once this plan is implemented is that regardless of the resource type, whether it be wildlife or watershed or recreation or timber or climate change, there's a whole series of monitoring requirements that are really part and parcel to evaluating whether or not the plan is even being used and is providing its intended results. So that's a big part of that. Another key aspect of this plan is that it breaks down in different tiers. And if you could scroll to the fourth page, go down, yep, right there. You can see in these boxes here, this is kind of a byproduct of the public engagement, and these boxes here call out to ways that we adapted this plan based on feedback throughout the process. And so you can see in that first box there on the top left, we've established these different tiers. You've got a first tier and a second tier of kind of achievable outcomes. And the first tier is kind of like, what can we do as a forest, as an agency, left with our own staff, with our traditional congressional funding year by year. It's kind of like, here's what we can output, if you will. Tier 2 kind of sets up an opportunity zone, if you will, with help from partners, stakeholders, and other organizations through shared stewardship. What are the things that we can do to kind of maximize, or add to our output? And that was a big topic of conversation among partner groups. And from this effort through the public engagement, the Nantahala-Pisgah Partnership organization was developed. That organization, I suspect, will stay in place, and they will continue to put positive pressure on the Forest Service to kind of maximize our output and achieve better land management objectives. So that was a key takeaway. And I think, this is my 5th national forest. I've worked in New Hampshire, Arizona, New Mexico, West Virginia, and here. And this is something new to me. This is kind of a new shift, I think, in how forests are beginning to do business. And really the last 5-8 years or so, this whole topic of shared stewardship has emerged. And I think just before I got here in the fall of 2019, the chief of the Forest Service came to North Carolina. I met with state agencies. They signed a pretty robust document that we call a shared stewardship agreement, which basically says, hey, we're all in this together. Boundaries are what they are. They're important, but wildlife and watershed and recreationists, public, they don't differentiate between these arbitrary lines on the ground, And so the idea was that we need to kind of compound our efforts by working together and be more collaborative in nature. And so that's a big takeaway. That's kind of a tangible way, I guess, for us to kind of quantify what we can do through the help of partners. And you can see some of those other boxes there. I know, I think like that middle one right above where the mouse cursor is, adding a 4th plan theme, partnering with others, and developing specific strategies. There's a lot of elements in this plan that kind of specifically call out to annual engagement, say over a collaborative trails development program. And so that's something you all can expect from my office, is some sort of engagement, whether that be through Friends of Panthertown or other stakeholder groups. We talked about the preserve a little bit. I think there's opportunity and expectation for us to engage on some routine basis, and some of those things are really specifically nailed down in this plan. So let me kind of round this out a little bit with the next steps, and you can just scroll down a little further, please, to that last little section. And I also have, I'll leave this with Mr. Adams, but I literally just got this morning, and this is kind of a one-pager, kind of an extension to that document, which goes through the objection process. So let's talk a little bit nuts and bolts as far as how things are going to unravel from here. Well, I shouldn't say unravel. How things are going to play out from here. So we don't want to unravel anything. So thank you. So once the final plan is released here in a couple of weeks, that is a final environmental impact statement, and then that has included with it a draft record of decision. And so if you know much about the National Environmental Policy Act, there's all these sort of brackets of engagement and timelines that are preset. And so what's next is there's an opportunity to object. And so anyone who had substantive comments, which you all did through the process, has an opportunity to digest this final plan, take a look at it, see how it played out compared to where you last left off with it. And if desired, if there's a sticking point or some point of concern, you could file an objection. And you could say, for this section, this isn't lining up with what we thought, and here's our rationale for that, and so on. And so there's some rules and process around that. Basically, in a nutshell, there's a 60-day filing period to file an objection. And then after that, there's some kind of transition time, about a 10-day period where individual parties are notified. And if they want to have a seat at the table, even if they didn't file an objection, they can still have a seat at the table to watch the objection process play out. And that's a 90-day process. And so all in all, it's like there's 150 days, and they're kind of all parceled out. The big two chunks are the 60-day filing period and the 90-day objection period, and then there's some interstitial time in between there as well. So I want y'all to be aware of that. I'll leave this document. This kind of has the basic gist of how you go about filing that, where you send it to, and all of that. So I do expect, it's with any planning process, it's always likely that there will be an objection. Most of our decisions have some sort of objection, even our project level decisions, to do, say, a timber harvest or some wildlife habitat improvement. Most all the time, those are objected. So it's routine enough that, we're never shocked when that happens. So, something as big as this, as many different points of view that there are, I would expect this process to get engaged, and then, we'll just navigate that. And so once that happens, the 90 days is up, the objections are resolved, ideally. If they're not, they're at least discussed and nailed down. And then the regional forester out of Atlanta is the final deciding official. He's the objection review officer, is the technical term. And so that's the way that plays out. So, I will leave this here. And with that, I'll kind of hit the pause button and open it up for questions on the forest plan topic.
Is the plan cover both Nantahala and Pisgah? Everything's the same components, the same
standards.
Same standards.
Correct. Yeah. Now that said, the eco zones have their own site-specific, kind of compartment level, standards and guidelines. So, what might be site-specific for, say, the grandfather district over near Hickory, is going to be a little different than down here. But yeah, the forest-wide or the plan-wide standards are all universal. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you have enough business cards for all 5 of us?
I think I do. Yep.
It'd be nice.
I'd be happy to leave those. Yep. You bet.
We have had some concerns here in our local, especially with the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, overuse during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us feel that trend will continue because even when people can travel other places, some people were introduced to our Great Smoky Mountains that had never been here before and now want to come back and those kinds of things. So do you feel this plan addresses those concerns of how that will affect the ecosystem when there's 1,000 more people hiking or
Yeah.
staying at Max Patch or
Right. Yes,
those
that's a
kinds of issues.
no, it's a very it's a very current, kind of observation and something that the forest plan, of course, doesn't talk about the effect from COVID because
No.
it was largely uh, crafted prior to that. However, yeah, it definitely talks about growth potential, continued recreation pressure on our facilities and on our trails. We talk a lot in the plan about sustainable systems, whether that be developed recreation assets or our trail system. We talk a lot about wilderness. Of course, in my district, we've got 2 wilderness areas. I think there's 5 or so across the planning area. I can't recall. But yeah, that's always a hot topic. And I think going back to my earlier statement about collaborative planning around recreation, in particular a sustainable trails program, that would be something where we could catch that in real time, through subsequent engagement.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions?
Are they, is it Mr. Waskey?
You got it. Perfect.
Is this, are they changing any of the plans about road closures?
No, not to. I mean, there may be some finer details that I'd have to dig into, but big picture, no. Did you have a particular area in mind here in Jackson County, or?
As you probably know, this used to be, there's another district here at one time, and it was the Highlands District.
Yes, sir.
And they did away with the Highlands District and consolidated it with the
Why?
Nantahala
Yeah.
District.
Yeah.
And after that happened, we had a lot of road closures in Jackson County, especially
Yes.
around Little Canada, with Caney Fork, places like that.
Yep. Yep.
And a lot of it, I think, come down because, well, I hate to put it this way, but probably some things that should have been done at Highlands never was done. And then when there's a consolidation,
Yep.
Mike kind of had to do some things that maybe should have been done before. And there's we had a lot of problems about it.
Yep.
And I think it's pretty smooth now, it seems to be. But that's been a contentious thing here with us for about, 6 or 8 years, I guess.
Yes. No, I appreciate that observation and feedback. I am aware of that. That's come up in a number of conversations, that, of course, that history predates me, but I'm aware of the situation, especially in the Roy Taylor acquisition area of the district. So I can tell you right now, the forest plan is certainly not compelling us to do anything different with our travel management in those areas, nor are we taking up any additional closures or dramatic road changes over there. Of course, there's always, if you go into a new timber sale area or something of that sort, you tweak the road system as needed as we go in there, but a big part of what was going on at that time, and I was in Arizona at the time, and we had our hands full of it too, and there were OHV issues. If you think you got BTV issues here, I mean, out west, it's total free-for-all in a lot of places, or at least it was. And so 2007 was the big travel management rule in the National Forest System nationwide, and that required all forests to undergo a travel planning process. And I think that's probably what was the case in Highlands, is that they didn't conduct their comprehensive travel planning. And so when it was consolidated, the new leadership on the district had to kind of clean that up. And I know it was painful from what I hear. I know there's probably still lingering concerns and issues around that. Yep.
It's something that they concerned with.
Absolutely. No, I very much keep all of that in. History is a key part, and a lot of us in the Forest Service, the leadership is a little transient sometimes. Mike was an exception in that he was the district ranger for the better part of 30 years. That's not often the case. And so, I think it's important for any new leader like myself to come into a district and understand those contextual, historical issues and keep that in mind with current management.
Speaking of transportation, I know One of the things, as you, part of your opening remarks, you're talking about the change in a whole range of the way we do business over the years. E-bikes, that's a big change. And I know we have that question. I've talked to constituents about usage of e-bikes on our trails, and um, as we look to maybe potentially, I know the town of Silva's talking about possible bike trails on the Pinnacle Park, and do you allow e-bikes? And I know I went to the Forest Service to see how does the Forest Service manage e-bikes, and they're still viewed as almost like a motorcycle.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there
Yeah.
any thoughts about that changing? Because that's a huge segment of population that's growing.
It is. Yeah. I mean, my personal thought on that is that I do believe it will change over time. I think it's inevitable. I mean, that technology is going to continue to evolve. It's going to get smaller. It's going to become more readily available. It's going to be more commonplace. You know, I think it's going to be more difficult to discern what type of equipment is what. You know, so I think the Forest Service is going to continue to track this, and it's going to evolve over time. I can't tell you how many emails over the last 10 years I've had about e-bikes, you know, and not only e-bikes, but electric wheelchairs. You know, there's the hoverboard stuff. There's all kinds of stuff. And so it always is bumping up against our regulations around that, which are pretty, you know, kind of black and white. And so some of these gray area issues are difficult for us. So for now, an e-bike is not authorized on a mountain bike or a hiking trail. You know, it's really relegated only to our system roads, you know, just like a licensed motorcycle would be.
Even though it has pedals.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can take an e-bike and it looks just like a traditional mountain bike, and in some cases, some people might not even know the difference. They think it's a bicycle, and all it is assisting you and helping you pedal. And so I'm encouraged that people are getting out and using them, and it's a great way to recreate for those that may at one time not been able to face a challenge of a mountain bike. But
Yeah. I'd like to keep an open dialogue on that. I'll kind of, you know, track with you on that. Maybe we can connect offline and keep that discussion going so we can share the most current information. Definitely.
other questions? Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, if I could, I'd like one other topic, if I could. Yeah, the secure rural schools piece, and just to get y'all up to speed. And I don't have any attachments for this, just a verbal kind of overview. But are y'all familiar with the Secure Rural Schools Self-Determination Act of 2000 and payment in lieu of taxes and some of this stuff? All right, so mixed crowd. Let me give you kind of a quick primer on that. So for a long time, I can't remember all the way back when, but I mean for decades, the Forest Service has been participating in a program called Payment in Lieu of Taxes. And this was basically when national forests were acquired in the East and when they were reserved in the West. They were never held in private ownership in large part out West like they were in the East. But nonetheless, when the Forest Service lands came to be, there was a recognition that took up acreage within the county, you know, acreage which otherwise could generate tax revenue which could be used for schools, roads, and all the rest. And so, you know, Congress recognized that, and they passed the payment in lieu of taxes legislation some time ago, a long time ago. And that created a scenario where they derived money from timber receipts. I think it was 25% or so of the revenue, you know, went to the county by acre. There was some algorithms around all of that. And you guys still get that today. That's still happening. Now, in the 1990s, there was a substantial decrease in timber volume. And that's for a variety of different reasons. But through that, you know, there was nationwide recognition that the PILT money, payment in lieu of tax money, was decreasing. And so in order to help rural counties in particular, Congress passed a piece of legislation in 2000 called Secure Rural Schools and Self-Determination Act. And that really, in a nutshell, is set up to kind of augment the payment in lieu of taxes program and provide additional revenue for schools, roads, and other things within the counties. And so with that, there are three different titles of that act. And Title I money, as we call it, goes straight to your school and road systems in the county. And you get that's happening. It's almost automatic. It really doesn't even pass through the hands of the Forest Service per se. It's something that we track, but it's not something we really manipulate. It's just sort of a direct, payment flow. And there's, again, an algorithm based on the number of federal acres in your county. And that's all available on a Forest Service website, and I can share that. And I think Don has that information. But Title II and Title III money, this is where it gets a little interesting. And so Title II and III are interchangeable. You have one or the other, and the county selects which one you have. Now, back in 2000 when this began, it appears that Jackson County selected Title III funding, which is what, I don't want to say most, but a lot of counties select Title III funding. Title III funding is set up to fund EMS, fire, search and rescue, that sort of thing for the county. It can help 911 centers. There's a whole laundry list of intended uses for those funds. And I think we're talking about 15 to 20 grand a year, maybe 17,000 a year on average is what you guys have to work with. And so you guys evidently ran with that for quite some time until 2013. And somehow, a box was selected. I guess there was sort of an open enrollment period, if you will, whereby Jackson County selected Title II funding. Now, Title II funding is very different. Title II funding is for federal projects or projects on federal lands within your county. And that is something that's a little more nuanced because it's a broader application of those funds, and it requires more coordination. So it's not as easy as, the fire department needs a new UTV for their search and rescue, staff. That's easy. You got Title III money, you can do that. But Title II funding requires coordination with the Forest Service and a resource advisory committee, which is a federal committee under federal rules and has a lot of kind of federal process along with it. So since that time, since 2013, that money's been accumulating because nobody's been spending it. Nobody's engaged with a RAC. We don't even have a RAC assembled in North Carolina for this because no other county for the National Forest in North Carolina has selected Title II funding. Everybody's getting Title III money. And so, and I'm not here to say what's right or wrong. It's totally up to you guys. But the reality is, or the situation is that you guys are going to continue to get this Title II money until there's an opportunity to change that if you want. And I don't know when that opportunity is going to occur. And so
What triggers that opportunity?
I don't know. So the act I mentioned earlier, the Secure Rural School Self-Determination Act of 2000, that gets renewed from time to time because it runs out. And so Congress continually restores or extends that authority. They just did that in this latest round of infrastructure, spending. And so that's now extended through 2023. So basically what happens is every now and then there's some unpronounced opportunity, to make that change. And, we've had some conversation, and at some point one of your predecessors and before your time had made that selection, I believe.
You had done some research on that, correct?
I have, and they're putting together a committee to discuss it, but they don't have a date when it's going to happen, or we'd be eligible to change that.
Yeah.
Change from 2, is that what you're saying?
I think that's what she's saying. Change from 2 to 3 if you wanted to.
We're the only county in the state it's 2.
Correct.
Well, there's 100 counties, how about that?
Well, 100 counties, but I'm saying of the counties that have national forest land in.
Yeah.
So that's probably, you're down in like maybe 20 counties or something like that.
So since 2013, which would be several years now, that money has just accumulated.
Correct.
How much money is that?
$120,172.
Okay.
And so it's getting to the point where it's catching the attention of some folks in Atlanta because they're looking at these balances
Yeah.
and they're there's no immediate pressure. It's not going to go away. It's your money, but we do need to grapple with what to do with that. And I have some more information to give you to kind of help steer that and guide that. So when this came to our attention, this was maybe in November-ish, that I caught wind of this and happened to have a meeting set up with Don. And so we've talked about this. This is something we've been discussing through multiple conversations within the Forest Service, all the way up to, not just the regional office in Atlanta, but the Washington office. We chased down a number of questions. First question, can we just make the change now? Or can you guys make the change if you want to? What does that process look like? And the answer we're getting back is you can't do it now, and we don't know when it'll happen in the future. And so it's sort of a black box. And I'm sorry to report that, but that's where it stands. And the other question is, can that money be dispersed? Can we steer that money for use within, of course, within the boundaries of the law? Can we go ahead and spend that money without establishing a resource advisory committee? And the answer to that question is no. By law, that money has to pass through the resource advisory committee, which that committee, let me tell you a little bit about the resource advisory committee. So it's a federal committee, as I said earlier. It's subject to federal rules. Every time they meet, you have to publish in the Federal Register, that there's a meeting, and there's all this sort of notification process tied in with that. The committee has to get approved by the Secretary of Agriculture in D.C. So it's a pretty heavy lift to get that committee, first of all, selected and then vetted and routed and officially approved. There's, there's Asheville, there's Atlanta, there's the Forest Service office in D.C., then there's the Department of Agriculture Deputy Secretary area, which you can understand, like the multiple layers of federal, structure that you have to go through is pretty intense. Now, it's doable. I'm just saying, it just takes time. Now, the committee has to be comprised. There's 3 categories in the makeup of this committee, and I can leave this handout here with Don. 3 to 5 people that represent organized labor, non-timber forest products, developed outdoor recreation, energy, mineral development, commercial timber industry, or special use permits on the national forest. So it's sort of that's a big category, but kind of people who are into the resource management business, with the national forest. 3 to 5 people in that category. Category B, every one of these is 3 to 5 people. Category B are folks who are nationally recognized environmental organizations, regional or locally recognized environmental organizations, dispersed recreation activities like trail groups, things like that, archaeological, historical interests, watershed associations. So these are more of your environmental kind of activist type organizations in that category. And then the final category is more of a public, facing category. It can be public at large. It can be an elected official, somebody who holds a state office or a local elected office, tribal elected officials or tribal government folks, school officials or teachers. So that's that category. I think is more to just round it out with sort of a general public elected official kind of point of view. And so all of that has to be satisfied. So the minimum you're talking about is 9 people. The maximum is 15. So that's the challenge, is to figure out how to go find those people, which you wouldn't have to do that on your own. This is something the Forest Service would be working hand in hand with you all to do. But we'd have to assemble that group And then those folks have to then get vetted, and then that eventually has to get presented to the secretary. And then once that's set, you go about having a meeting, and then folks bring ideas for the use of those $120,000 to that committee. Now, there's rules around that, and we can get into the details later. But the rules are basically they have to be within the county on federal lands or have some sort of nexus to federal lands. And so the committee then grapples with those projects. The committee figures out what kind of submittal process they want. I mean, they kind of govern this whole thing. And then folks present those ideas. Forest Service personnel often come with ideas. Public can come with ideas. You guys can have ideas. That all goes to the committee. They bat that around. They make recommendations. And then my boss, the forest supervisor over the National Forest in North Carolina, is the selecting official for those projects. Now, they rarely go against the committee's recommendations, but that's just how it's structured. So that's kind of the big picture overview. So to kind of sum that up, you've got a bunch of money. It's going to keep piling up. We don't know when you can change titles if you want to. Maybe you like it this way. I don't know. But nonetheless, to clear that account as well as spend future money, this committee is going to have to be established, and we're going to need to start navigating the process. Now, one bright spot I'll say with this is once the committee is in place, you can pre-approve topical spending, categorical spending opportunities in the future. So, for example, if you said if the committee was like, we love trails, we want to see more trails, then you could load that up and say, here's a list of a dozen trails. The price tag on this might be $750,000 to build all these trails. That committee can kind of go ahead and pre-select and say, yeah, we've vetted this, we approve it, we're recommending this. And that way, you don't have to reassemble the rack every time. You've got sort of this pre-decision kind of selection that's already in play that you can just kind of keep spending money toward those approved items.
All of these projects have to be in the Forest Service, in the forest, U.S. Forest.
They have to be on federal land. Now, not just, I guess if you have Park Service and Blue Ridge Parkway, for example, that could be a place where those funds could be spent.
There's other funds in lieu of taxes that go just to schools or can,
Yep.
right?
Those are the Title I funds, schools and roads. Yep. And built money, which is still happening in the background too. Yep.
Could the money be used, for example, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, like Friends of Panthertown.
Yep.
That's a really great place where there's a lot of work that goes on to help add to the national forest.
Yep. Absolutely.
So it could support efforts by groups like Friends of Panthertown.
It could. Now there's some things around, like, I'd have to go refresh my memory on the rules, but there's like some developed recreation things that are off limits. Like you can't build a new office, or you can't build a new building per se, but I think trails are a pretty safe bet. Yep. Yeah, and that would be a great use of that money. We work very closely with that group, of course.
Sure.
So, those are the kind of ideas. I think I've seen some other stuff where when I was in West Virginia, many of our counties in West Virginia knowingly elected Title II funding, and they liked it. It worked really good for them.
Or enhancements to the ORV on Worry Hut.
Yep. Or you could do some watershed resiliency or some fisheries habitat projects. There's a number of things you could do. Yep.
Now, this committee, would that be people from Jackson County, residents of Jackson County, or would it be outside people?
Either or. I don't think it differentiates that they have to be from Jackson County. Now, you might want them to be.
Yeah, I would never. I wouldn't want some
I
people
think
from
so.
Atlanta coming up here telling us.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, we would do most of the lifting on the process around this, but we wouldn't just do this in a vacuum. This would be something where, what I would think we'd want to see is some sort of working group, that you all had a hand in selecting.
Do you know, how did we go from 2 to 3?
How do you?
How did we?
I don't know. You went from 3 to 2. Yeah.
We went 3 to 2.
Yeah.
How did we do?
I don't know. Well, I think there was an open window where somebody in the county government made a selection, and
And they decided to take it.
yeah,
And nobody knows who that was.
Do you know?
I probably have a good idea, but I'm not going to say right now.
No.
Okay.
I think we chased that down, and we can talk more. I can dig a little deeper. I think we chased that down a little bit. I might have an email that has some dialogue on that. I think did we talk about that at all?
Was that just a one-person idea? Or
I don't
was
know.
there a
I don't
committee
know.
to that at the time? I wonder. Was it just
I
one
wasn't here during
person's
that time.
decision?
I don't know. I wasn't on the board during that
Don't
time.
know.
Yeah.
Not our choice to make,
Right.
but we're here to kind of help
That'd be an
with whatever.
interesting answer.
Yeah.
And so the idea, excuse me, is if we have to expend the money that's currently in the account, if we were to be successful in getting it to change back to the other category, that money doesn't shift back to the other category.
Correct. We chased that down as well
Still need to do
Yeah.
it.
because we thought y'all might like that idea just because it would bypass the need for the Resource Advisory Committee, and you could just get your hands on it and then go forward with a Title III mindset. And again, this is completely for you all to think about, discuss, and there's no imminent, kind of deadline here for you all to make this decision. I just want to get this on your radar. We can keep talking about it, and I'm here to help, no matter what y'all want to do. Now, I will say this. What I'm presenting here today in terms of a path forward is all within the confines of the law. Okay, so there's just legal realities we have to deal with. Now, this is an act that is reauthorized by Congress from time to time. This time it's on a 2-year extension. Sometimes it's 1 year, sometimes it's more. You may want to have conversation with your congressional delegation here in North Carolina to figure out if maybe there's another way to remedy this. Okay, we can't do much else other than kind of work the plan, But if there was some sort of congressional kind of one-time rider on a future funding bill or something of that nature, perhaps that might help, alleviate some of the constraints that we're working with. But that's for y'all to navigate. That's not something we don't go into lobbying mode. That's not our. But I just want to put that out there that, this might be something you want to discuss further with your congressional delegation if you desire to. So,
Thoughts or comments?
sorry to lay that on you, but I figure it's
No, we
better.
It was very clear. Thank you for your
Yeah.
time.
and we thank you for
explaining.
your interest in researching and helping us find solutions.
Yeah, happy to do it. Happy to continue doing that, and we've got a lot of folks working on it. So, if you have any questions along the way, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll before I slip out, I'll leave some stuff here with Don, business cards and all that. And the good news is you got 120 grand. So, you get it spent some way or another, and we're here to help you with that. So.
Do you know how rare it is somebody walks in my door and sits down and tells you there's $120,000 sitting in the account? That's a rare conversation.
I just want to thank you for your articulation and your knowledge on the subject. And what is even better, we have Miss Darlene Fox on the trail now.
Very good. Very good. All right. Any other questions for me? All right. Very good. Thanks.
Thank you.
We're all in number one.
Yeah.
We're all in number one that goes to school and roads, and then you get to choose either 2 or 3 for the other. This was separate from the Title I money. So we are getting that as well, but we might not have quite as much land as they do on that one part. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next we do have Bob Cochran, our HERE Director for our homeless program, and this is a continuing conversation with our homeless programming, and this is a follow-up meeting in regards to a couple things. One is planning, future planning for what programming would look like for whether it be a homeless shelter and or how do we just continue to provide homeless services in our community. I'd asked Mr. Cochran to come to this board to discuss a couple of things. If you recall, we previously discussed that we had put aside some monies, the ARPA monies, and also Dogwood monies to help with the planning for what our future homeless program would look like. So again, I'd asked Mr. Cochran to come and talk to the board in regards to what resources he may need to start that process. So I've handed out information. It's supposed to be online today, but somehow or another I missed getting it to Angie. So I did hand out a hard copy to you. And then also I'd asked Bob to just come here and talk to the board in regards to just an update on our homeless program. And then I did mention one other item. It was brought up at a previous meeting in regards to just making sure this board has a basic understanding of the partnerships that are out there. What are other agencies and or stakeholders involved in providing services to the homeless population group in our county? And I think you'll see that in this plan or these professionals that Bob is looking to hire, that it would involve all of these community stakeholders when you're trying to figure out what homeless services look like in our community. So having said that, Bob, I'm not trying to steal any of your thunder, but just sort of trying to remind everybody why we are where we are today and why Bob was invited to come speak to the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Don. I realize I'm encroaching on Heather's time here already, so I'll try to be brief. I put together some numbers for you just so you kind of get some scope of our services. Both last year, which is a full year, and then this year that goes through December, so that's a half a year. I won't go through those numbers, but I'll be glad to answer any questions for you in regards to those. We have other data broken down further, but I just kind of gave you a snapshot of what we do and our two primary goals, which is to meet immediate needs, and then the biggest goal, which is to get people into permanent housing.
And let me just ask a real simple question, because I know there may be a lot of people that don't know this. And explain a little bit about Code Purple and what are the parameters of Code Purple? And is that a locally decided parameter, or is it a national standard? So, because I hear that also on like NPR for other areas.
Well, we borrowed the name from Asheville. I didn't know if it was a national, but we did, it was something that people kind of understood. But basically it means freezing and below. So when this program started out under Southwestern Child Development Commission and maybe to some degree under Jackson Neighbors in Need, it was an ongoing cold weather. It started in November, ended in March. And at some point we realized that the need was going to be greater and we needed to begin to think about how we're going to address a greater number of people. And so we broke it out into a 30-day shelter where we're working with people more long-term and more intensive to help give case management toward permanent housing. And then meet immediate need, which I have always perceived Jackson County's goal is to keep anybody from freezing to death in Jackson County. So we currently have 12 rooms for Code Purple and 6 rooms for the 30-day program, so 18 rooms altogether. And we essentially, the standard, so that everybody is kind of clear on it, is the National Weather Service forecast for Silva. Okay, and I know that, if you were to look at Baltimore, cashiers or that sort of thing, but most of our homeless folks are concentrated in Silva. So we use that standard. And so that's, pretty much how we base that. Does that answer
Yeah,
that
that's
question?
very good. Yeah.
Okay. You can see the other services we provide listed over there on the side. The other thing I didn't put on there is that we do respond 24/7, 365 to emergency needs. So, I got calls last night at 7:30 and 10:30 from people, and we'll go take space blankets out, or take somebody if we have a vacancy. I'll go out and pick them up and take them to the hotel. Right now we're full, and we still get a lot of calls. And I was on a webinar today, and I just noticed, something that we do a lot of, and that's to be audited and monitored by the state. And they were mentioning that, and I thought, I think I mentioned that to the commissioners because, we have had 100% on that, and I'm very proud of that. It's a lot. I call it HUD world. When you entered HUD world, it's a lot of rules and regulations and a lot of forms. And if you do this business, you have to learn them, and it's a lot of red tape that goes along with the money. So it's accountability and that sort of thing, but it's a lot. Mr. Allen asked me to kind of give you a update on our data, to speak to some of the partnerships that we have. There are some questions about how we work with others, because there are other organizations involved in housing the homeless. And then to speak to some of the consultants that we're looking at for our planning going forward towards a permanent shelter.
Excuse me, could I ask one question before we move to that on this current data?
Yes, ma'am.
When you mentioned that you're full, what happens then when you get that call that there's somebody and it's freezing and they might have a child with them? What happens then?
Well, one of the things that I've had as the director, I've had to clarify in my own mind is, what do we do in a situation like that? And I've harkened back to last December when we had so much COVID funds. And up until that time, we had never had a cap on Code Purple. And I may have mentioned to you all before that we got up 40 rooms at over $17,000 a week. And I realized real quick, and it was not stopping. The calls were still coming in. And so at some point I realized, we can't be completely open-ended, and we're a finite organization. This community and our organization has finite resources, and we can't meet every need. So a little while ago, when I mentioned this county's priorities in terms of keeping anybody from freezing to death, I can't guarantee that anymore. It's just reality.
I see. Sure.
And but the two people last night that called at 7:45 and 10:30, I've offered to bring them space blankets. These are big emergency blankets, toboggans, gloves, and socks. And I was, declined on both of them. So what that tells me is that they've probably got some other alternatives, and I could be misinterpreting that, but that's how I interpret it, that if they were really facing freezing, that they would probably put me up on, something like that. So, but to answer your question, that's not the only thing. There are occasions, and we had a meeting among a lot of the other resource providers, and this gets into the second subject of how we work with other organizations. We had a meeting in September. It was virtual. We all got on a Zoom call. But United Christian Ministries, First Methodist Church, Jackson Neighbors in Need, and St. David's Episcopal. Those are the primary players that step up in Silva. And we agreed that they had all been in a piecemeal fashion responding to, people who come directly to them. And my proposal was that here it's designated as Jackson County's homeless services provider. Let us be the clearinghouse, and if we have a need that we can't meet, that we feel like is a serious need, then we'll reach out.
Okay.
And an example of that is the HUD regulations. If if you imagine a pyramid, and at the very top are the most acute needs, and as you go down that pyramid, the needs become less and less. So at the very top are the people who are literally homeless and who could, are camping, sleeping in their car, or staying under a building shed or roof overhang in Silva. Those are the literally homeless, and they're the smallest group at the top. The next group, as you go down, is a bigger group, but it's housing insecure. These are folks that kind of are with relatives today and might have a falling out and are out tomorrow, or who were with friends and that sort of thing, or had a rental and couldn't afford to maintain it, or got evicted for one reason or another. So that group is much bigger, but HUD doesn't fund that second group. It only funds the top group. And, that's a policy issue that we could talk about, but that's just reality for right now. And so we have to verify homelessness. So one of the things is, if they stayed in somebody's house the night before or in a hotel room that they paid for, we can't use our funds to pay for them. So sometimes we'll use a loophole, and we'll call United Christian Ministries or a church and say, if you as a charitable organization pay for them 1 or 2 nights, then that qualifies them as being homeless.
Okay.
And so we've done that because that is a little loophole that we see this as a genuine need. This is a family that is truly, homeless, but they were staying with family, or they got kicked out, whatever it was, they were housed the night before. So that's one example of how we partner with folks. Sometimes folks like Disability Partners have big pots of money that they got through, the COVID funds, and sometimes our clients learn that and they'll call them directly. So they have gone through all of their money, but there are times when, and there's times when our clients call like Bruce McConnell with Jack Users in Need directly, and it may be 10 o'clock at night, and she may say, just go on down, and she, understandably doesn't go through the red tape of contacting me and saying, what should we do, and that sort of thing. So there are times when our clients reach out directly and just get lucky, and they do it that way. But we've tried to coordinate and make sure that we're all on the same page. And I think as we go along, that has gotten better. We try to really communicate on a client level. We're working with this person. We don't have a lot of money. Again, when you're talking about that second tier, it's a much bigger part of the population. We don't have a lot of money to help people stay housed. We through our Back at Home program and through the HOPE program that you may have heard about, there was a lot of homelessness prevention funds. But we don't have a lot of homeless prevention funds here. But occasionally we'll work together with somebody to patch together. If United Christian Ministries will give this much, Mountain Projects will give this much, and we can chip in $150. But I don't want to become known as the agency to come, you can't pay your rent, because, again, that's a huge population, and we'll run out of money real quick. So we can't be that. But occasionally, we do things like that as well. So.
Cochran, does that second tier folks, if they do reach out to an organization like Neighbors in Need, and Neighbors in Need puts them, decides that they need some help and puts them into a room, does that kick them up into the top tier?
Yes.
So it's okay. All right.
Yes. That's that loophole that we'll work with. If a charitable organization puts them up, then they're considered literally homeless, because they're not using their own resources for housing. They're using the community's resources, if you will. So, um, so I did want to mention one other thing before I go into the consultants and looking at a more permanent shelter. We did just get our first. It's not a full audit. They said unless we're required by a funding source like the state or Jackson County to have a full audit, we could have what's called an audit review. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's similar, but it's not quite at the level of a full audit. And Darlene was okay that we get that, and I've not yet forwarded it. I just got it today, but I do have one copy of that, and I'll be glad to forward a PDF to you. And we've got a bound copy coming for Darlene as well. So I wanted to mention that, and it was good. We didn't get any negative, surprises or anything. It looks good. So okay, to go on to the consultant. Anything else? Okay. So, I'm still learning a lot about homelessness and the strategy for a community like ours to deal with homelessness. One of the things a paradox that I have encountered and continue to encounter is, and it's frustrating, and that is to work hard to address the problem and to be making progress in addressing that problem. But at the same time, what you're doing causes that problem to exacerbate. And what I mean by that is by providing shelter, emergency shelter, and helping people get into permanent housing, that's a good thing. I mean, in all of our books, that's a good thing. But unfortunately, Swain County and Macon County, and to some degree Haywood County, don't address those needs as much as the needs are there. Now, Haywood County, as you know, has the Haywood Pathways program, and it's a very solid program. But there's greater need over there than Pathways can handle. And so the hotel model, I think, like the two folks that I offered to take space markets to last night, ultimately I believe that they had some other choices that were better than taking a space market, right? And so we're getting not only those in our county that have other choices and increasing our numbers, but we're also getting folks from other counties that's coming as far away as Graham County and Tennessee, Georgia. We get a number of folks from Georgia and even Florida. So in response to that, I think, and again, I'm not a real expert in homelessness, but I believe that if we provided a lesser level of accommodation than a hotel room provides, but is yet safe, secure, respectful, clean, in terms of a high quality, best practice homeless shelter, I feel like we might get more of a right-sized request for need. I could be wrong. We could get inundated with
Well, I think
need, but that's my belief.
Very reasonable assumption.
Yes. So that, and we may get some experts to come in here and tell us, differently, but that's my thinking is that, we won't get folks who just want a hotel room. And it's comical, some of the calls we get, about this, I need a hotel room for the night. It's just like calling the Holiday Inn or something. So, yeah. But, so I had originally reached out to a recently retired North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness staff person who had been the longtime director of the homeless shelter in Durham. Now, Durham and Silva and Jackson County are very different, but yet he had, very successful for fundraising and ongoing administration of that, and I felt like he could help guide us. But unfortunately, Terry Alibi wasn't available, but he referred me to Beth Bordeaux and Stan Holt, who both have experience in homeless shelter administration, um, and who are in the business of consulting. And as you can see somewhere in their, I think beginning on page 4 of their proposal, you begin to see some of their experiences with the city of Sanford and Durham and others. So they are confident and experienced and have presented a proposal. As you can see how it breaks out. And Mr. Adams and I came up with a scope of services. And the beginning, is research. Let's look at the data. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's look and see what our level. As you know, the first step in the planning process is, why are we doing this? What's the need? Why are we involved? And that's the data part. What need are we trying to address? And then to look at the focus groups and stakeholder interviews, which certainly would include you all and then some of these other organizations that I referenced earlier. And then look at the best practice. Let's, again, not recreate the wheel. Let's look at what others have done for decades and found is working and working in 2022. And then culminating, I guess, in a big stakeholder meeting. And I think, it's wise to do that in a structured, somewhat controlled way. And hopefully we can avoid some of the pitfalls that we've read about in the Smoky Mountain News, that's happened in our neighbor county, animus that comes out in group meetings and that sort of thing. So hopefully everybody can be heard and it can be recorded and that sort of thing. And then the draft plan. And as you can see, they've broken that out and for each piece and with a total of 15,000. One of the things that there's a second consultant that I would hope to engage, and that is Haywood Pathways. And I would invite each of you, if you've not already been on their website, to look at their website, and it's very impressive in terms of how they've developed, and because they're in an old jail, and just in one conversation I had with Mandy Haycock, I realized that I was spending more money on a data entry person than she was spending on a grant writer for 20 hours a week, and she was getting such a bigger bang for her buck for 20 hours a month, rather 20 hours a month with this grant writer than I was getting for someone coming in every day doing data entry. And so, I can learn a lot from somebody like that. And Mandy is similar to Mr. Holt and Ms. Bordeaux, in that she has experience in some of these urban areas, Raleigh, and I can't remember the other one, maybe Greensboro, where she was involved with some larger homeless shelters. But now she's in a place where they're still larger than us, but it's much more similar, mountain community, smaller town, groups and so forth. So I'll have hoped to present a proposal from her as well, and I contacted her before coming over here, and she said, it's just blown up today. I'm not going to have it. I'll have it ready tomorrow. I have it almost done, but I don't have it complete. So I said, well, that may be helpful for our commissioners to hear that things happen, particularly in a homeless shelter. And so, but my thinking is that we could get kind of two different flavors or two different perspectives. One, this kind of, low, high level, macro level, or looking at the data and best practices, and then a more practical, somebody who's brought this from the ground up. This is how much it costs. This is, not saying that we would do anything exactly like them, but at least we'd have a model and say this is how much it costs. If we were to tweak it, maybe it would be a little bit different.
Absolutely, yeah. Commissioner Wood, did you have a comment or question?
Well, I do. I have been reading some about the pathways in Haywood County and then talked to Tommy Long, one of the commissioners from Haywood County. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is not an emergency shelter. It is, they're trying to address for their residents people who are moving out of homelessness. So they have to have certain criteria to be a part of that program. They have to agree to go to work. Their children are in daycare. They're helping cook their meals. So it's not an emergency shelter. Is that correct?
I understood. Yeah, I think that their main program is more like our 30-day program, where they really provide intensive case management towards employment and really getting people, filling their cup, so to speak.
Yes.
But my understanding is that they do have Code Purple. I think they had to curtail it or reduce the numbers, because once you go to a shelter, finite shelter, then you've got a fixed amount of space to work with.
Exactly.
You don't have an open-ended number of hotel rooms. You've got a fixed amount of space. And so I think that because of COVID, they had to reduce the number that they could serve on freezing nights. But my understanding is that they still had that on some level. I don't know specifically.
I don't think they do.
Well, it'd be interesting to see the
Yeah,
report.
it would be.
We'll find out when
Yeah,
they get
we'll
the
find out.
Yeah, I don't know. They may have had to do away with it altogether.
Yeah. And I think it would be so good to talk to them, because I think it started out with that emergency thing. And then because of some of these issues, which it would be so good to hear what happened and that progression, so that we, obviously wouldn't
experiences.
make
That's what
the
we're
same
hoping to
mistakes.
gain is
Yes.
their experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's all I have, unless there are other questions. And you can see, I think, the time frame that they're participating in. I think that don't know, Don, if that comported well with your time frame in general for what you were hoping. Because we could go back and ask them to tweak that. But that basically the final plan is being presented in June, according to this.
It sounds like a good start, and I very much appreciate your willingness to come here today and to give us an update and to share how this process is unfolding. And I think, as you've alluded to, this is very much an issue, a problem, however we want to call it, categorize it, that we all, as a board, as a community, as a county, we're all going to have to figure out how we face this together. This is not a simple solution. It's not a one solution fixes all the problems, but it's a good effort in trying to address an issue that's not just here, but it's everywhere.
Right.
And not trying to reinvent the wheel, as you said. I think it's a lot of great ideas here, and I'm very excited about participating in this process.
Good. Well, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I would just like to express appreciation to you. I know that that paperwork that you do is a huge concern, but you're doing such a good job with it, and this couldn't happen. We couldn't get these funds if you weren't doing that. So thank you so much. And
it's good for an aging brain to learn new things.
Yeah, well, listen, oh my goodness. But also the UCM and United Methodist Church, Neighbors in Need, and the Episcopal Church, who are also really trying to address this. That shows that our community has a lot of caring individuals.
Yes.
And I appreciate that so much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for you and those that work with you. And these organizations like you've mentioned and have been mentioned here that are willing to help people in need.
Oh, I know.
It's to think about someone who is at a point where they have no one else to turn to and they're calling for help. I mean, it's hard to be in your position to make those kind of life decisions for somebody. You know, this is what I can offer you, this is what I can't offer you. They can be tough, and I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Yeah, God bless you,
you.
Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Adams?
Yes, sir. Next up, we have Ms. Baker. Ms. Baker, I'd asked her to just come and give an update in regards to the OSHA mandate that's out there in regards to the mandate for vaccination. We are in a position now where there's some unknowns, but I didn't want to just show up a meeting after a decision is made by the courts with a lot of information in front of you. So I asked Heather, just even though we don't have the specifics and we're waiting on court rulings, I just thought I'd go ahead and start these conversations.
Absolutely. That's very good.
Hello. So there are actually 3 federal vaccine mandates, and so I'm going to briefly talk about the other 2, and then I'll spend most of the time on that OSHA, probably the one you've heard most about. So the other 2, the first one is the CMS mandate. That's the Medicare Medicaid Center for Medicare Medicaid is the CMS one that you've heard that affects healthcare workers, and that one is on hold currently as well. However, a lot of the healthcare facilities have gone ahead and instituted it and have required vaccines for their employees. Not all have. We thought at first this might apply to our health department, but then the standard actually came out. They exempted local health departments unless they're a federally qualified health center, the FQHC, which ours is not. Most health departments are not. So we don't have to comply with that one, although it's on hold. The other one, the third one, is the federal contractor vaccination mandate. This one's on hold as well. It is pending in the at the appellate level. I think waiting on some litigation in the lower courts level to see how this moves forward. This one would probably not apply to us, but it could. And this is a federal contractor mandate. So if you've got contracts with the federal government for funds, then it's possible that you would have to, anybody working on those contracts would have to be vaccinated and compliant with. Now, they do exempt grants, and most of the federal money that the county receives is by grant, and so most of ours would be accepted. It only applies to contracts after September 24th, I think, of 2001, so it'd only be the most recent contracts if we have them, and probably would only be at the high levels, 250,000 in some cases as a minimum, 800,000 in some cases as a minimum. So probably that mandate will not apply to us. We're not going to have anything that falls in that category. However, in the future, you could have federal contracts that have that language in it that say if you accept this money from the federal government, anybody working on this contract is going to have to be vaccinated, and then it would be a matter of seeing who that applies to and does it. But for now, we don't have to worry about that one. So the third mandate then is the OSHA mandate. You've probably all heard some about this. This would apply. The federal OSHA would have standards that would apply to employers who 100 employees or more. So obviously the county would fall under that. However, in North Carolina, the OSHA, federal OSHA, Occupational Safety Health Administration, is the OSHA, only applies to private employers in North Carolina, not the state and government employers, as instead North Carolina, through their Department of Labor, has an agreement, a state plan agreement with OSHA that North Carolina's office, its Office of State, OSH, the NCOSH office, will apply the standards and enforce them. And so but they have to be at least as restrictive as the federal OSHA standards, right? They can be more restrictive. but they cannot do less. So if the OSHA mandate, which I'll talk about, comes to fruition and is mandated, then North Carolina Department of Labor at that point would have 30 days to issue its standards that would then apply to North Carolina local governments, and that would, in that case, that one would apply to us. Right now, that that particular mandate is pending at the U.S. Supreme Court. You probably heard there were oral arguments last Friday at the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think going into it, the expectation was it would probably be upheld because there had been other mandates that had been upheld at the U.S. Supreme Court. However, after hearing the oral arguments and everything that happened last Friday, I think the expectation is now that it will be overturned and it will not be enforced. And at that point, then we would not have to worry about implementing that. But we don't know. We don't have that result yet, and that's what Don was referring to. That's information that we don't have. If it goes the other way and it is upheld, then North Carolina has 30 days to issue its standards, and then we'll know what our guidance is, and we'll be looking closely because then a lot of questions come into play. Who was covered under that? If it covers the county employees, there's some potential exceptions for the sheriff's office and for the register of deeds. But they may end up being covered under it. It depends what North Carolina does. So there's a lot to learn there. How that is written is that everyone would have to be vaccinated or supply negative tests or negative test once a week or testing once a week. So it does have a testing component where some of the other mandates I mentioned, the CMS mandate, does not have a testing component to it. This one does. So that's a brief overview, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about any of those three.
Any questions? It's a wait and see.
It is a wait and see. And I think we're expecting it possibly to go the other way, and that's why we wanted to be ready, but it's hard to be ready for something when you don't know exactly what that's going to be.
Do we know, so you probably don't know, is there any timeline, or do we know when that ruling may?
I think it'll be soon, but we don't know. Yeah.
And the reason I ask that question is obviously if it's overturned, then there's nothing that we do. But if it's upheld, then you as a board may start getting asked questions in regards to, there are boards who've taken a stance already on this, boards of commissioners on this issue, one way or another. And so you may be asked individually what you as a commissioner are planning on doing if it's upheld. And so now you know that ultimately you don't even know what the rules are right now.
Yeah.
If it is upheld, then North Carolina OSHA has 30 days to come in and actually dictate to us basically what the rules are. So it really is just trying to provide you some knowledge that if all of a sudden this ruling becomes public next week, then you basically know it's still a wait and see to see what North Carolina OSHA mandates.
It is never a good practice to answer a hypothetical question when you don't even know what the rules are going to be. Thank you, Heather.
Next, I did have Ms. Caraway here. I believe there was some indication that from some board members that we wanted an update on the pandemic issue. Ms. Caraway did have a statewide conference call today with all of the health directors across the state, so she knew she might be a little late here. I was asking Ms. Caraway, and we asked her to come give an update, but there were two really issues to be discussed. One was an update on the pandemic, and one at some point to start just openly discussing where Jackson County is in regards to our state of emergency, in regards to the mask mandate that's out there right now for county facilities, in regards to how that's being done under current regulations. It's being done under state of emergency, and it really was to open it up. I mean, Mr. Chairman, you and I have talked about this, that at what point does this become a governing body conversation versus a state of emergency? At what point did this become a state of normality conversation versus a state of emergency? And it wasn't meant to be decided today, but it really is to start bringing this out in open discussion. Is that the part of our conversation you and I were having?
That is correct, and I think Don is, as what he's alluded to, under the state statutes, I have the authority as chair to declare these state of emergencies locally in these executive orders. And we've followed suit, trying to mirror what the state has done and the governor has done from a state perspective here locally. But at some point, my question was to Don, why we wanted Shelley here, is when do we move sort of towards normal? When does, because I'm afraid that COVID's going to be with us for a long time, and we're still under what's technically a declared state of emergency. And is there a point in time coming up where we can sort of become more normalized? And so that's why I felt like that we might want to have this conversation today.
But we'll go to the next topic if it pleases the board, and then.
I'm here, Don.
Oh, you did zoom in. I'm sorry. I thought you were coming. Hey, Shelley.
Hi.
I didn't realize you zoomed in. Well, did you hear all of that?
I did.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll back up then, and then let's talk about your report on the pandemic.
Sounds like a plan. And thank you for inviting me and for having this topic come up. And it is very timely. We actually had a Board of Health meeting last night as well. So I apologize to Commissioner Woody for having to hear it again. But I learned even more today on the state call. I had a state call this morning at 7:30 as well. So there's a lot going on. And of course, I'm sure you've been following it, but basically in North Carolina in general, those 4 key metrics we've always been looking at are all going up. So that's not good news, but we've been seeing it in other countries as well, so it wasn't a surprise. We've had record-breaking case counts, higher than the very beginning of this pandemic, but again, that's following the course of other countries as well. I would say, though, we have the highest hospitalizations in North Carolina since the beginning of the pandemic. That's always a concern. But just to throw out the numbers, yesterday, North Carolina had 18,254 new cases. Honestly, that's a very, very large number. Actually, we've gotten up to 29,000 on January 8th, and we're at a 31.1% positivity rate in North Carolina. The goal is 5, so that's really, really high. So our entire state is in the red zone, Jackson County as well. As of yesterday, we had 310 cases, and that may not sound like much, but compared to the 7 days before that, it's a 160% increase. We have not seen those numbers for a while. So, and our positivity rate is 29.76 in Jackson County. And the sad thing with that is, if you think about it, we're testing more, so you would think it would go down. So it really does mean it's definitely here. And of course, we all know Omicron is the one that's pretty much taken over as dominating the scene. It's not Delta anymore. I think the last I heard for the southeastern United States was at 95% Omicron. Don't know if it matters what the percentage is. It's here, and it's here in strong force. Did want you to, I'm sure you've heard that the preliminary data does say it is a less severe disease. And part of that, just so you know, is it affects the upper respiratory tract, the nasal, the nose, and the throat, rather than the lower respiratory tract, the lungs. But that doesn't mean people are not getting seriously ill, and lots of people are getting sick, as seen by the increase in hospitalizations. But 80% of the ones that are ending up in the hospital are unvaccinated. So it kind of gives you a feel for maybe you personally stand. But unfortunately, we also learned there is a decreased protection from the primary series of vaccinations, one of J&J or 2 of Pfizer and Moderna, or even a past infection. So that's why the boosters came onto the scene, but also became extremely important for this Omicron, because Omicron seems to be not paying attention to you if you don't have enough of that vaccination in you, or if you have enough antibodies. So, and then the big sad news too is that 2 out of the 3 therapeutics, the monoclonal antibodies that we were using, are not effective against Omicron. And the one that is left that is fairly effective is in very short supply. So there are now standing orders that prioritize who would get it if there is even any available. So that's not going to be something you fall back on. So I guess the main thing I want everybody to hear is, since it's a less severe disease, especially if you have gotten vaccinated, especially with your booster, that's great, except the concerning thing, and primary concerning thing, in my book anyway, is the strain on our healthcare system. I've talked to the hospital. They generally have from 6 to 10 COVID inpatients, and their ICU has been full, but it really hasn't been all COVID patients. But they've had to be on diversion, on and off diversion over the last several weeks. But it's also due to a lot of acute non-COVID patients as well as the COVID. But what has happened too, that you've probably heard about, is there's staffing issues due to the staff being sick, because this thing is so contagious. And so they can't even fully staff all their licensed beds. That puts us in a little bit of a sticky wicket. And as of this morning, they had 20 employees out. So what they're doing is literally managing their staffing and bed capacity on an hourly basis. They literally huddle every hour, but they can do it. They've done it before, and they work with other hospitals and EMS services, and they are great at communications, and they're managing it. And they're not to that high critical point, but I'm just saying it is a strain, and we should want to do everything we can to make it not get worse. So that's where vaccines and boosters, they have been and they continue to be the greatest weapon in fighting this virus, and especially against severe illness, the hospitalizations and deaths. The good news is Omicron doesn't seem to be as deadly. So yes, they're sick, a lot of people sick, but we're not having as many deaths relatively speaking. Just to give you an update on boosters, because things have changed there as well, we now have a recommendation for boosters for children, 12 to 15-year-olds, 5 months after their second dose of Pfizer. They can only have Pfizer as their first dose and their booster dose. If you're over 18, of course, you can choose any brand of booster that you like. But then they've also gone one step further and recommended a third dose for immunocompromised children, 5 to 11. We've always had that for immunocompromised adults to have a full third dose, not a booster. And now today on the call, I hope I'm retaining this well, they are now seeing a possible booster for those that have had 3 full doses, the time framing for that. So it kind of does really point to their belief that we really need more vaccination in our community. They also reduced the time frame from when you can get your booster. Now, both Pfizer and Moderna, you only have to wait 5 months to get that booster, and it's 2 months after the J&J. So I guess I just really want to stress to you and everybody you know to get your booster as soon as you're eligible, because it does strengthen your protection. And the vaccines are free and they're readily available. If you don't have to have health insurance, you don't have to have an immigration status. We are, of course, still giving them at the health department. I did want to mention, though, just on a health department note, not a COVID note, we're pretty much almost back in full swing as a health department. So when there was a surge in vaccine demand again and testing, we worried a little bit. So during November and December, we enlisted the help of a state vendor called Optum to support the vaccines first when those pediatric vaccines came on site. So that was wonderful. They did some clinics at several of our schools, the Sylvie First United Methodist Church and the Cullowhee Rec Center. So they came and went for November, December. And then we also even asked for and received support from the National Guard beginning in December. And we're supposed to have them through March or April. So that allowed us at the health department, within the health department, to increase the number of appointments available at the health department. We used to be able to do 180 vaccine appointments, squeezing them in between everything else. And now we're up to 370 appointments per week at the health department. It's all day on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And this National Guard has also helped us with a lot of outreach efforts that we're going into communities, long-term cares, whatever we can do. And that allows our nurses to stay in our clinics. So it's been wonderful to have them. It's just 2 guys, and they're both medics, and they're wonderful. And so far, we keep them busy 3 to 4 days. But as testing comes more on the scene, we're trying to increase our capacity here at the health department. Supply is the issue, so that they can then help us with testing as well. We do testing now, and I'll go into testing a little bit more in a minute. Because the second thing I really wanted to talk about, besides vaccines and boosters, that is a primary tool for this fight is our masks. And the reason I wanted to bring it up, everybody knows we have the mandatory masks in our county buildings, and everybody knows you should wear a mask indoors. But what hasn't been spread widely, but we're working on it, is our pretty homemade cloth masks that match our outfits are simply not cutting it for Omicron because of its highly transmissible state. So the guidance is now saying, if at all possible, wear a surgical or a procedural mask, or it's called a KN95, or of course an N95, which is what healthcare workers wear. The good news on that front is yesterday, the state reached out to us and said they are going to be sending N95s, the N95s, to all local health departments so that we can make them available in our community. And Jackson County looks like it's slated to get 8,200. 4,100 will go to DSS, 4,100 will go to the health department. And so that was a welcome surprise. And nobody has to get fit tested. If it's for community use, you do not have to get fit tested. So that's great news. And we have to just determine how we distribute these. But on top of that, on the call early this morning with the schools and the state, all schools and childcare centers can order N95s from the state. Apparently, the state has quite a stockpile. And so that is great news for our community, because we really want to try to help and get the word out that those cloth masks might not be doing it, and you need to get, at the very minimum, a surgical mask, which is 3-ply. The KN94 is 4-ply, and then the N95 is 5-ply. The surgical mask is still better than the cloth, and it's not bad. These are disposable, but people have been prudently letting them rest or go in the sun and maybe wear them more than once. But we just want to get that word out. And by having all these free ones that we can give to some of the historically marginalized folks that might not proactively go seek them out, we can have our community have more of those. That's also going to help stop the spread of this stuff in Jackson County. And the other thing that, of course, happened that maybe was a little controversial was the changing in the isolation and quarantine. I'm sure you've heard by now that people with COVID-19 isolate for 5 full days and then wear a mask for an additional 5 days. And if you're exposed to COVID-19, you should quarantine for 5 days and mask for 5 days. But then there's exceptions if you're exposed, that if you're fully vaccinated, you don't need to quarantine, but you should get tested at 5 days. This, again, it's partly scientific and partly because they wanted people to truly do some quarantine and isolation, because a lot of people were ignoring the rules when they were 10 days and 14 days. But also, it has to do with the fact that this Omicron is quicker to be contagious. So it could be day 2 and you're already contagious, and it's quicker to resolve. So that's why they're letting folks, even if you have COVID and you're mildly symptomatic, at 5 days, you can go back to work with a mask on. And if anybody is around you and you have your mask on, they're not considered exposed to a case. So it's changing the field quite a bit. And that's also helping us keep people at work and keep people going on about their lives a little bit, because that's been part of our problem. The only caveat to the changes in isolation and quarantine were it kind of changed the definition of fully vaccinated, because if you're eligible for your booster, but you don't have it yet, you're considered the same as unvaccinated because you're not completely vaccinated. So that's a little bit of a rub, but that encourages you to get your booster. Now, if you're not eligible yet for your booster, you are fully vaccinated because you must have been vaccinated fairly recently. So that's just a little bit about the vaccinations. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was testing. And boy, when the push for more testing started, our health department really was back in full swing, as I mentioned, and our capacity for testing was not going to be enough. And we really wanted to make sure there was availability for free testing in Jackson County. So the health department couldn't handle all of that demand. So, and we also, by the way, heard other stories just of lack of availability, people, many hours in line. So we called the state with that state vendor, Optum, and they set up shop in, ironically, in the Meridian building where we were before we moved back into our beautiful remodeled building. And then they also set up shop up in Cashers at Village Green. They have been a huge support for us in the testing realm. They test Thursday through Monday all day, and they're completely funded by the state. We don't have to support them in any way. They even brought their own furniture. So it's been wonderful. But there's still been, even with them, more of a challenge lately due to a nationwide problem with the availability, especially of rapid tests. So there's a big push for testing now. All the guidance says to test all the time, and then employers are requiring testing. You just heard about possible testing initiatives for even all of our county employees. So the demand at the local level is soon going to exceed the capacity, but they are working on it. And on this call, I was just on with the state. They definitely are making strides, but we are still just not there yet. And even our Optum site, they got to a point last week where they had rapid tests, but they would only give them to you if you made an appointment for a rapid test. If you walked up, you had to take the PCR test. So there might be a little bit of a hiccup, which it's a tough time for that to happen, but it will change. So it's kind of what's happening across the country, but the state is talking to us every week about our capacity, about what we need on the testing front. So I do have faith that we have ourselves poised, staffing wise anyway, and resource wise, except for the actual supplies of the test, to ramp up our testing. We've ordered everything we can here at the health department, both rapid and PCR, to be able to ramp up our testing here at the health department as well. We're just waiting for the supplies. And you can kind of keep track of that on our Facebook page and our website. But on the Facebook page is where you can, every 2 times a week, we put the link to make an appointment at Optum. So, but just before I totally end, I wanted to circle back to and this is going to be a personal rant, I guess, what I said about our primary concern being the healthcare system, especially our hospital. It's not, I would love for everybody to think about it not being just the hospital. Yeah, the hospital is feeling the crunch, but really it's also our community, because with this Omicron being so contagious, you see restaurants that can't even open because they don't have enough staff. And in schools and daycares, and parents deciding between whether they have to stay home with their kid because their daycare is closed or not be able to go to work. So I almost wonder if our message should be, we're not wearing our masks anymore to protect ourselves or our loved ones. It's really to protect our community's economy and making it through. The one positive note, and there's got to be one in there, so I'm going to put one in there, is that in looking at everything around us, and I mean globally, because this is global, it does seem that it always holds true that this is a very, very steep climb up, and then it's just as steep rushing back down, and it does seem to be a shorter period of time. So as we talked about last night in the Board of Health, we will make it. And as you're talking about the executive orders and the mandated masks, those will go away. We have got to get to a point where this is not a pandemic, but we treat it as an endemic disease, as we do many others. I think smallpox is the only thing that has been completely biologically eliminated off the planet, because, the flu is still here, measles are still here, COVID-19 will still be here, and we've got to learn how to live with that, not doing case investigation on everybody because we don't have the resources, nor is it really any point anymore. In a way, even though we are doing case counting, do we really need to know how many cases or what the percentage of those cases is? We need to pay attention to the number of hospitalizations and deaths, and that's when red flags can go up and down. And so I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I think the state is really working now towards getting us to that point of backing out. But before you start your discussion about the executive order, I just wanted to say the state was saying the same thing, and then all of a sudden they extended it just because of this huge surge right now. And again, the mandate is more for when you need it so that you can do things such as, the executive order is what you need to have in order to do things like mandates. And also there's some things about FEMA and requests for National Guard. So I would say we don't need an executive order once we don't need to mandate anything. And that's maybe too simplistic to think about it that way, but you're very appropriate in thinking about not having to have that in place forever. And the state may be the guide, or maybe we just look at Jackson County and how we're doing. But as one of my Board of Health members last night challenged me on, well, wait a minute, even the 1918 flu, they never have vaccines, but it ended after a couple years. And it's true, it did, but it was herd immunity and a whole lot of people dying. And I'm just disappointingly going to say that in Jackson County, our adult population, we only have 58% of them vaccinated. So we don't have all that immunity out here yet. We'll get there. And with all this Omicron, that'll actually help us get there as well. So I know I've talked quickly. I always do that. And I've said a lot. If you have any questions, and I'd be happy to have any more conversation about the executive order now and any other time you'd like to chat.
Any questions for Shelley concerning this update on the pandemic?
Mr. Caraway, it's Mark Jones. I may have missed it, but how soon would Jackson County get those 8,200 masks that you were referred to?
We're going to update us on the delivery schedule, but it looks like some people were getting them already as soon as today, and we'll get them no later than Tuesday.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And we are trying to figure out, we were thinking of jail and EMS, and of course we've got some historically marginalized, but we've got to make some decisions for those 8,200 masks in Jackson County.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Questions? Well, I think when Dawn and I first had this conversation, this was pre-Omicron, and given what we've seen and given the update that Shelley has given us, I think it's prudent that we stay the course on where we're at. I do think she's right that this thing will spike. We will see it go down. And hopefully when we get to the springtime, early summer, that we are trending back towards a more normal state. A lot more people, unfortunately, they may contract Omicron, but they're going to develop some immunity and some antibodies, which may help us in the long run later on. So maybe we hold the course, and maybe, Shelley, you could come back in a quarter, maybe 1st of April, and sort of update us. By that point, maybe we're seeing a better picture.
That would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Shelley.
We're moving on.
Yes.
All right. Next, we have Rob Hawk, our Extension Director. Now that we have a state budget passed, as you may or may not be aware, Jackson County contracts with the state of North Carolina in cost sharing with our Extension employees. The way that contract works is whenever there's a state raises involved, it does require approval from the county in regards to the match to those state raises. And that's what Mr. Hawk is here to discuss with the board.
Thanks, Don. Well, hope everybody had a good Christmas and Happy New Year to each of y'all. It's good to see you again. So like Don said, the state did pass in December for the holidays legislative salary increase, and it was 2.5%. So us being state employees, and then also matched roughly 50-50 with each employee. There's the state or the county salary portion. So what I'm seeking is the match on the county portion of 2.5% to match the state 2.5%.
And for all your employees, what is that total amount?
The total is $2,323 annual. So, for example, if an employee made, is making $31,200, or say $30,000, and 2.5%, it would be roughly. Let's see here. Let's say their state portion was $15,600. 2.5% would be $390 annually. As an example. And then Don gave you the spreadsheets that we work off, which is called a county salary change form. And this will retro back to July 1st of 2021. And this will go into effect in the February paycheck.
So is it 2.5% county and then a 2.5% increase from the state? So it's a total of a 5% increase? Or
No,
is it
it's
two and a half total?
2.5 total.
Okay.
I mean, if you broke it down, it'd be 1.25 state, 1.25 county. Yeah. And they do look at what we understand from the legislators and the universities. They hope to, over between now and 2 to 3 years, is have a total of 5%. So
Any questions about what's being presented? If there aren't any, then we will just add this to the agenda at the next meeting and ratify it.
that'd be great. Thank you all for everything you do. Appreciate it.
Being patient and sticking it out with us.
Yeah. Do y'all want this memorandum from the state?
Leave it with Don if you want.
Okay, I'll do that. Sure.
Let's take a 5-minute recess before we finalize the last discussions.
All right.
You know what?
Open that knife.
Which one?
Okay, we'll go ahead and come back to order. Next is item 5. Mr. Adams?
Yes, sir. Um, I do want to pick on ourselves a little bit. Not only did we double the municipal grant application, we misspelled it here, but all right, we do have in front of you, we did receive 3 municipal applications. I provided the applications, copies of them in your packets. The first one, the town of Silva, basically they're looking to utilize the $5,000 grant to match their, I believe, $400 to build out on Jackson Street. I believe that's the street where the Methodist Church is. And you can see they have some sidewalks that they wish to replace. The next one, and I believe it's mixed up in the packets here, but if I'm not mistaken, attachment 2 is going to be, is that Dillsboro?
Yes.
Okay, so this one's actually going to be the Dillsboro one, not the Webster one. Dillsboro is requesting funding to help with the downtown bathrooms. They have received their quote. They are looking for the $5,000, or excuse me, no, this is Webster. This is Webster here. Okay. So, excuse me, this is Webster. Webster's looking to purchase some park benches and picnic tables, basically for the park there next to Southwestern Child Development at the ladies softball field for Smoky Mountain High School in downtown Webster. So as you can see, they are requesting funding for those park benches and also picnic tables. And then they put the quotes in here. The next one is, so it is on there, correct? Dillsboro. And Dillsboro is looking to upfit their downtown bathrooms down there right off the railroad tracks there. And they are requesting the $5,000 grant. They're going to match for $4,200. And they've put pictures in the diagram here to just show the upfit in the bathroom itself that they're attempting to do. Everything's self-explanatory, so Mr. Chairman, I'll just turn it back over to see if you have any questions you want me to follow up with them on, or.
Yeah, and Commissioner Jones had some questions. He and I were talking before. Do you want to just repeat those questions? I think they're very relevant for the board discussion and as we consider these projects.
Well, since we budgeted $20,000 for this municipal grant, and we got 3 for 5,000, and the max is 5,000, that gives us a little flexibility on whether it's another municipality that submits one or a project that might be in our own neighborhood that we seem to all agree that that's where that additional money might go.
Or we could fund it at full request too.
Of one of those requests.
Yeah. That's,
Full.
I mean, we say we got 20,000 in the account, and they can apply up to 5,000. But if we have outstanding funds and they're asking for 5,400, for example, could we give them the extra $400 exceed the 5,000?
And
I
it could be
think
a
so.
piece of equipment that could be used at the park in Savannah or park in Dillsboro. I mean, whatever. We'll just leave that to the county manager's discretion on who may come to you to ask for some extra funding or a project that any of us have in our communities that we might like to talk to each other about.
Okay.
Any questions about any of these projects? This is something we'll vote on at a later date.
It'll be, if it's okay with the board, I'll put it on the next agenda for a vote.
Okay.
Fine.
All right.
Next item is just the budget schedule. You do have a text in your packets, the proposed budget schedule itself. This is really just coinciding with our previous budget schedules. I would request everybody just obviously go back, take a look at the dates, and just work them on your calendars. Just do note in there, we do have a special call budget meeting, revenue discussions, that March 10th. That's something we added on a couple of years ago that we found to be a good meeting, basically to just talk about any revenue issues and things of that nature. And other than that, this is your standard budget session. I do also I want to point out Just everybody pay attention to this June 9th and 10th date here. Let me back up and go to the May 19th and 20th date. That's when we see you have your fish called meeting presentations. And I just remind everybody that June 19th, right in the time period, that is the time period where you as a board are making your final decisions. And I just point that out to you now because when you're planning vacations and time off and things of that nature, ultimately what happens is if we attempt to get the budget passed on the 21st, ultimately really is that week before is when finance needs those decisions. This is really 2 weeks before, so that really gives us a couple of weeks in there. And I ask everybody to go look at the calendars and when you're planning in for future vacations and so forth, they're all important meetings. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just mentioning to you those 2 weeks right there. If you're wanting to make final decisions on the budget, then please keep that in mind.
And so what we should do is take this calendar and sit down over the next couple of days, look at our personal calendars, our work calendars, see if these dates work. And if tentatively they look like they're going to work, then are you asking us to vote on this at the next meeting, sort of officially put it out there for the public to know?
Because what's really, I'm pointing towards the end because that's for you. I know we have our budget, a couple of things. Look at the February 22nd date. Let me pull this out where I can see it better. They're all important dates, but I just want to point out, see the budget retreat on February 22nd. That's obviously the first thing you need to look at and make sure that you have availability there. And then if you look at February 8th, that's the manager working with staff. March 1st is really just the applications disseminated for nonprofits, March 10th. That one, you really mark that date because that's when we're asking you to meet. So now we're February 22nd and March 10th. You can see March 25th, it really has nothing to do with you as a board. March 31st has nothing to do with you as a board. But then if you go April 2nd, April 12th, that is a regularly scheduled meeting, so you should already have that on your calendars, but definitely look at that. Obviously, April 18th through the 29th, that's when I meet with all the departments. May 10th is a regular work session meeting, so that should fall already in your schedule. May 17th is a regular commissioner meeting. And then May 19th and 20th, those are special calls, so just mark that in just when you got to look at your calendar. June 7th is a regular meeting, and then that's where I go past that June 7th all the way up. That these next 2 weeks, just making sure, hopefully, not only do you have June 7th, but 9th and 10th to start off with, but that's the week where you try to be flexible too, if you need more or less meetings. So I do want to point that out. But obviously, you don't have to put all this in your schedule, but yeah, I'll put this back on the agenda for the 18th and for you to let us know if this works for you. We're good. Next discussion is really in general terms, and it's not it's really an unfortunate discussion, but I want to talk about the timing of the salary study. Unfortunately, due to just either lack of personnel and other issues, COVID issues that our company that we're working with, Evergreen, is having, they are delayed in the salary study. Where we're at right now is that we're open by next week. Let me back up. We've sat down with them. They've got a lot of the front end information done. You recall, we did a presentation to you where we've gone to all employees. Employees were allowed to submit information about their job descriptions, their functions, and things of that nature. They were out for market study. They shared preliminary information with the executive team last week. We felt like at this point they didn't have the most up-to-date information from Macon County, so we were able to provide them Macon County information. We wanted them to go back and ensure that we have Macon County's information. So once they do that, we know that we have all the counties that touch us and all the counties that we compete with in this market study. They're updating that information. They're going to be meeting with us and it's all virtual meeting in the next couple of weeks where they're going to start giving us the preliminary information. That still requires myself, Darlene, and Kathleen. We still need a few weeks to really evaluate, look through. Yep, it takes time to go through this information. So a more realistic time frame for this is going to be that we would look to try to have some information to the board February 8th or the February 15th meeting. The goal would be to put you guys in a position to adopt something by March 1st, the regular meeting, and at minimum at the work session. I know you normally don't vote, but if an occasion that you vote on the work session meeting date, normally just recess that first meeting of the month. And so if you're able to get this accomplished by you as a board in position to vote on something by March 1st to March 8th, that would allow it to be implemented for the paycheck for March 18th. And one of the things that I do want to go ahead and mention to the board and for you to give me feedback, I think you heard Mr. Hawks say that the raise that the state has given is retroactive to July 1st. Now, the goal was never to have these raises in place July 1st. The goal was to have something in place by January 1st. Okay. And unfortunately, because of delays, we obviously just not able to get them in place by January 1st. But even from a budgeting standpoint, so forth, we always looked at an implementation date of January 1st. So I would like to eventually come back to this board and whatever the board chooses and decides on to make it retroactive to January 1st. And so that at least allows us to proceed forward with what was originally planned, even though we're delayed in the actual recommendations itself. So,
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, and
Yeah.
it's only right to do that. And,
Right.
Yes,
and we want this information to be right.
yes.
and so if you're able to do that, if you're able to meet that timeline, then we would be looking at the week of March 18th for true full implementation. But then that next week or the week after, we'll get it worked out with finance, then we would do a separate payroll run for shoring up and making it'd be a retroactive pay run is what it would be. But that's just an update there, Mr. Chairman, and that's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Deets, do you have any additional items today? You got two. Okay. Go right ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
If in fact I've already mentioned this once, stop me, please. I've been approached by a person or two that fish and guide and do that on the Tuxedo about the importance of a restroom somewhere halfway between up at Rolling Green down to where the dam used to be at Dillsboro. And the reason being, there's more and more women that's wanting to fish and get in these boats and stuff. And just to be straight out with you, these men can stop and go up in the woods or somewhere if they need to use a restroom or whatever. And he said, we got women said, I'm not going to, there's just nowhere I can.
Yeah.
And I think it's something needed and would be important. And he also said, talking to this person, that they really would like to see a put in, is that what they call it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Down somewhere
Or access point,
about the
yeah.
Baptist church somewhere maybe, with a restroom. And so I think it's something we could look at and not realizing that, I guess, I fish and fly fish, and I see all the people around the southwest, southeast in particular, that you see fishing up there. And I didn't really realize there's as many people in the county guiding,
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
like 100 people.
Yeah.
they're doing
The
well too.
economy, that's all bringing down, and I think Julie at the chamber should get a lot of credit for that, as much work she's done on that. But that's one thing I'd like for us to maybe look at and see what we push to do. And the other thing that I got on my mind is something probably is none of our business in a way, But not having to do this myself, but some of my family in the last few days and hearing other people talk about having to go get a driver's license renewed and stuff. And the amount of hours we've got people that's spending at these offices trying to get a driver's license renewed and whatever. And I'm talking about people waiting for hours to get there. Are y'all familiar with this problem?
Somewhat.
And that's not us, that's not our problem, but it is our problem in a way, because when it's our citizens, which it's the citizens all over the state, I'm sure it's got the same problem. But we got a huge need there. We got people really that's taking kids out of school to go there and wait hours and hours to try to get in to get driver's license. We got older people doing that. I got mine renewed online after my wife and I worked on it about several hours, because it's the simple thing to do. And we get to the point and it just blow up on us. And I got a lady to help me and finally got it through. But that's, I really believe this is something that
Could be
somebody
improved.
needs to push the whole state to do something about some of this.
Right.
I mean, they need more people to work. I talked to a fellow the other day, and he pulled his kid out and he drove all the way down to Rutherford County to get her driver's license. That's the nearest place he could find maybe to get an appointment or something. And it's really nothing to us, but we got people that's taking off work and everything else to do that. And that's not good for our people, our businesses, our schools.
Okay. Maybe we can,
I mean, I don't know what we'll do other than send a letter or.
our sheriff is here and indicating he's got some kind of answer.
I
I don't have an answer. To echo what the governor said there. Our ladies downstairs is responsible for issuing our concealed carry permit. It's really becoming a problem now that we're finding, because they got to have a valid ID to show. A lot of them can't get their renewals and they can't get their driver's license or something renewed. So it has been an issue in our office too with concealed carries. With the delay in the scheduling on all these people getting their driver's license renewed. So it's impacting us downstairs as well. And it's increasing, the numbers is increasing of people that's having problems to get renewals because they can't get an appointment to get their renewal. We got a 60-day window and they can't even, if they call this week to get one, there's a pretty good chance that they're not gonna get one within 60 days. So that's causing them to have to go back and take a refresher course or take a complete course to get their concealed carry permit renewed. So it's causing a lot of issues. So I'm like the coach, it ain't really none of our business, but somebody in Raleigh needs to.
It is a concern.
It's an old system that needs to be revamped.
Maybe this is something we can write a letter, start with, just write a letter requesting some information, try to figure out what is the root cause of the problem and make sure that Representative Clampett knows about it, make sure that Senator Davis knows about it, make sure that our local state delegation knows about it and they hear from us that it is a concern and that it is causing problems on county functions like the sheriff provides, that we would like to make sure they're aware of it and see if we can figure out what the problem is.
Kevin Corbin, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Clampett.
He's Haywood County, but that's still.
It's something by law that you have to do, but then they're not providing any means to do it without really going to a lot of trouble.
Yep, it's very valid.
Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Woody, do you have?
Yes, I will make one comment to Commissioner Dietz about, I'm on the Sustainability Committee for the TDA, and we had a long discussion at one meeting about bathrooms along the Tuckasegee. And they have that map, the fishing map and they have where bathrooms are, and there's that big gap, just where you're talking about, because there is one by the Greenway where there's the put-in, and then there's one in Dillsboro that's open, but then in between,
Right.
there's nothing for
Need-
public
Need
use.
one like right there at the
So
bridge.
Webster,
Right
yeah,
there at the bridge where,
and that
you
was
go on
a
to get turned
big-
onto 116.
Yeah, and I
That's a good
think
spot.
particularly for our female fisher people, that would be a really good thing, so. But I
The
did,
older you are, the smaller you want that gap.
yes. Yes. All right. Now, is he referring to my recent birthday?
I am.
Okay. I did want to bring up, I got a very nice letter from Marie Driver, and she's the leader of the 4-H Club Smoky Mountain Seekers. And they're a North Carolina native pollinator garden project. So this is a local 4-H group. And then I did ask her, the age group now is a mix of elementary age students, but older students could come if they wanted, but right now it's small. And what she wanted to know is if we could provide a location on county property where they could transplant seedlings sometime late in April, and then this would be for pollinators. They were thinking possibly a location near the Justice Center. And so I was wondering if we could pursue this and allow them to do that. And I think it would add some beauty, but also bring some pollinating insects around. That would be good. So I'm willing to talk to Ira or.
I will just let Don, forward that to Don and let Don work with our landscape maintenance
Okay.
staff.
All right,
See if we can accommodate the request.
Randy, okay, yeah. So is that okay if I do that?
Yeah, I'll just forward it
All
to
right.
Don.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Well, Mr. Adams doesn't have much to do, but Lisa Leatherman with Duke Energy, back in the relicensing, I think they committed $400,000 for Jackson County over the next, back then it was 40 or 35 years. I don't think they've expended all those funds, so it might be something that Duke Energy could help us with.
Very much well could be.
And if maybe Mr. Adams would reach out to Ms. Leatherman and see what might be available.
Talking about for the bathroom?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because they did build the one by the Greenway.
And the
That
one
was their
down
money.
toward 440 Whittier.
All those.
Yeah,
lines up
you're
there.
right, at Whittier's, yeah, that's true.
Commissioner Striplin?
I do have something,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, but I want to, before I publicly announce it, I want to run it by you first.
Okay, that'll be fine.
So we'll do that in the next couple of days or
Okay,
something.
that'll be fine. All right. Mr. Adams, anything else?
No, sir.
Do I have a motion then that we adjourn the meeting?
So be it.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
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 All in favor? Negative, say no.